Funny, embarrassing, horrible things you have witnessed at a bar. Working security in a bar in rural Ireland. Half an hour before closing, two of the local guys stumble up to the door, literally holding each other up. I had no intention of letting them in for their own benefit, but then they explained that it was Friend A's stag night and they were on a mission to have 1 pint in every establishment that sold alcohol in the town, and my place was the second last on the list. Keep in mind this is rural Ireland and we counted 18 different premises that sell alcohol. I knew the guys well and they weren't troublemakers and were close friends of the owner, so with his approval I let them in for a pint. Kicking out time comes and they are both slumped over half finished pints of Guinness. Friend B gets up to stumble to the toilet, and as he leaves, Friend A pukes all over the table and most of it ended up directly in the glass in front of him. Friend B arrives back after a minute, before the staff could clean the mess up, and in his drunken state took no notice of his friend's situation. He told him to get a move on so they could make the last bar, and Friend A proceeds to pick up the glass of 70% puke, 30% Guinness and downs it in one go, obviously forgetting his recent chunder. I gagged, yet Friend A didn't even bat an eye, drank the lot and stumbled out of the bar with his friend onto the last pub. At the bottom of the world, there is a city. In this city, there is an Irish pub. In this pub, I witnessed a goddamned miracle. A young, beautiful couple had been arguing back and forth in the corner for some time, and I had overheard through my crude understanding of Spanish that she was worried she might be or was pregnant. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything. They were quite vocal and it was very drawn out. He wanted her to leave her parents and live with him or something like that, but her father hated him and wouldn't let her. An hour or so passed, and the father came charging in with the police to arrest him. For what exactly I wasn't sure. At that point, the angry father was screaming at the young man so violently, his face went blood red and he started taking massive gasps of air, but looked as though no air could enter his lungs. He repeatedly tried drawing air in, until he collapsed into a ball on the ground. The young man immediately sprung into action, pulling out a Swiss Army knife and grabbing a straw off the bar, and performed an emergency tracheotomy. The sound of that first gasp of air in a room so solemnly silent was the most incredible noise I have ever heard in my life. The entire bar erupted in cheer, and the relief as the rush of adrenaline faded left many with trembling hands. As he was taken out to the ambulance, the father, with tears in his eyes, was holding the hands of the young man and mouthing the words "Lo siento, lo siento, lo siento" over and over again. Mouthing the words I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, for the lazy like me. In a bar club in not so rural Ireland, see this crap-faced guy come upstairs looking a little shifty. He edges over to a low table where there are a load of glasses and without turning around picks one up and holds it as if it was his. Waits a bit to see if anybody challenges him, a real pro, before chugging it back. He barely registered that he'd picked up a glass with a candle in it and poured hot wax over his face before moving on. Crazy kids. You losers keep drinking your beers. That just leaves more delicious candle wax for me. Oh frick, that's good. It melts the stress right off your face. Well, my favorite bar in the universe is in Wisconsin. It is an old house from the early 1900s, which was a party house for many years, and got converted to a bar in the 1980s. This place could have volumes written about the owners, clientele, and stories from the bar. However, since it was converted from a house, the front room still has a giant front window, which was common in houses in this area from that period. This bar is called the Port. Across the street is another, far worse, bar that is a standalone brick building with an alley running alongside the bar. I think at the time it was called Harborside Inn. A bunch of my pals are boozing and looking out the front window when we see a couple disappear into the alley. They duck behind the dumpster, and since the man is standing and making pleasurable faces, and the woman has disappeared behind the trash bin, it is quite obvious to us that she is blowing him behind the dumpster. Since we are viewing this all from about 40 feet away and through the closed glass, it is like the funniest silent movie porno that we could imagine, and we all enjoyed a few good laughs over our beers and viewing entertainment. Of course, a discussion evolved on dumpster head and the merits of a woman willing to imbibe in a mouthful of mule behind a dirty by garbage dumpster. The next thing we know, a woman emerges from the front door. She looks left, looks right, walks back into the bar whilst the guy is still receiving the dumpster BJ. A few minutes later the same woman comes out of the front door, with phone in hand, and walks toward the alley. When she sees a blower and blowee she goes haywire. Bear in mind, we are watching all of this as a silent movie, but you can see the woman erupting with anger. The chick who was giving the dumpster BJ scuttles away and the guy and second woman continue to argue and go nuts. The woman briefly stops arguing with the guy and goes back inside the bar. She comes out a third time, with her purse in hand, and confronts the dude again. This time, she whips off a ring, throws it on the ground and scurries off toward her car where she drives away. The scene closes with the dude, aka the BJ receiver, on his hands and knees searching under a beat up minivan for the wedding ring his wife apparently just threw on the ground. And again, all without sound, but the narrative was unbelievable. No sound required to understand the full story. TLDR. Dumpster BJs, a woman scorned, a marriage destroyed, and we watched it all as a live silent movie. One night it was slow. Two guys came in, they order beers, and one of the guys pulls off an ummy boot, pours his drink into the boot and starts drinking. This was not a quick little stunt, it goes on for a while. People start to notice and get increasingly weirded out. The two guys ask for more beer and the bartender is really grossed out and having a hard of it but basically gives in a pause more. By the way, watching someone drink out of boot is really disgusting. They weren't laughing. They were both kind of solemn, not enjoying it. No one was talking to them. It was pretty eerie. I was sitting there, trying to figure out what this was about. Why the frick was it happening? Finally I thought I figured out what was going on. I came up to them, squared off, looked the guy that was drinking out of the boot and said, showing your loyalty to him, because you wronged him somehow. There was a pause and the non-boot drinker said, yep, caught him with my girlfriend. I dumped her, and don't want to lose him as a friend. A little booty can both destroy and repair a friendship. I worked in a burlesque club that quickly descended into chaos and disgusting men. Worst I saw was a man was standing outside the bathroom, spinning in a circle. The always popular 360p. I was on a uni trip to China and my boyfriend and I were with some friends at a bar in Beijing. It was about 4 AM and we decided to leave. Just as we were about to walk out a fight breaks out on the dance floor. We turn to look and the bar staff all start taking off their shirts, grabbing bottles of alcohol from behind them and start breaking bar stools. They head over to the dance floor with their crude weapons and start smashing bottles, hitting everyone with bar stools that was in sight. Worst part was some innocent guy that was trying to walk away from the fight got a whole glass bottle broken on his head. He went down and started convulsing on the floor, blood everywhere. His friends grabbed him and dragged him outside. Everyone thought he was dead. It was awful. Chinese bars are some intense crap. At one of my favorite bars, there's the main bar but there's also one in the back corner for basic drinks and bottles. There's a small sink that's actually outside the bar perimeter for dumping dregs and ice. Looked over one night to see a guy pee in like a urinal. I tell my friends, we have a laugh. The guy finishes up and another guy steps up behind him and proceeded to do the same thing. There is a line of drunk guys to pee in this sink in the open bar. On a bar patio at around 11 PM or so I was having some drinks with friends and then began to have an intense political discussion with one of my prof's old teaching assistants who was also there when out of the blue, mid-conversation, he just projectile vomits to the left. It lasted about 10 seconds and created a steaming pile of vomit beside us. He then proceeded to continue where we left off in the conversation like nothing happened, as if he didn't just cover half of the patio with his upchuck. My older brother was at the Australian Defence Force Academy for a couple of years and I went out one night for drinks with him and a bunch of his buddies. It was a pretty quiet midweek night, and we were in a half-empty pub with a jukebox playing solemnly in the background. Eagle Rock by Daddy Cool came on and without so much as a glance at each other every single one of these army guys, about 15 or so, formed a circle, dropped their pants to their ankles and started shuffling back and forth, all the while continuing their conversations and sipping their pints. When the song finished, they hitched their pants back up and kept talking without so much as missing a beat in their conversations. I turned to my brother and said, "Dare I ask, He said, "No, you dare not." I never got an explanation. It's become somewhat of an Australian custom to do what's referred to as the eagle drop whenever the song comes on. The lead singer of Daddy Cool went to the University of Queensland and in tribute the pants are dropped and one dances like an eagle. Saw him play live last year and whilst playing proceeded to eagle drop. Top bloke. Don't know if there is a advar reason to this though. Let's see. All of this at a place called Gandalf's. Some guy gets roofied and another guy proceeds to make out with him. The victim's female friend is screaming and trying to break them apart. Blood all over the urinal. Some guy started shoving me and I pushed him back. He fell on the ground, which is literally covered in broken glass and soot, cutting his wrist open and bleeding everywhere. The bouncer's using a taser on people in the street outside. There's this obese goth guy with a glass eye who rides a really old motorcycle. He emits great stench. One night the place is so packed, probably a student night, literally wall to wall with people. Yet despite the dense fog of unventilated cigarette miasma, people avoid him with at least a 1 meter radius. He was like Moses, parting the sea. There's probably more. I used to work at a bar, so I have a few stories from a few different positions, but this one from when I was a bathroom attendant is my favorite. We had a dwarf in the bar that night. He got absolutely smashed. He came into the bathroom, a beer in each hand, and realized he was too short for the urinals, so he went into the stall to pee. He didn't close the stall door, and started peeing. I honestly don't remember if he put down his beers to undo his fly, but he managed to get the urine into the bowl, so whatever. Once he finished, he spun around on the heels of his tiny feet, shouted "IT's party time" and ran out of the bathroom, his elf-like dong just dangling from his pants. I do not know what happened to him after this. Worst thing I saw. I used to work in a backpackers bar in London. These 3 Canadian guys turned their shot glasses over one night and looked at me and the manager, then said, "Give us Southern Comfort." We're like, "What the heck are you gonna do with it?" They go, "Put it in the little dip. We're gonna snort it." Manager says, "What the hey?" So we fill up the little dip with Southern Comfort, which they promptly snort. Oh god dang, that burns, holy freaking heck, again. So we give them some more. Holy crap, that burns, arg frick again. They were like freaking Teletubbies. Teletubbies that swear and snort liquor. I ended up losing track of them after a few times because I was mostly working the floor that night. But when it came time to kick everyone out, I came across on passed out on the floor underneath a table. One of the girls in the group dragged him off when I found her. TLDR. Had 3 Canadians snorting Southern Comfort in my bar. I'll have to try that with Coke. On a weekend trip to Nashville, my buddies and I ventured into Tootsie's bar and got pretty lit while there. We decided after an hour or so to make our way to another establishment, and made our way to the door. The setup there is so that the live band playing is situated directly next to entrance exit, so we walked right past the band to leave. The lead singer, for some reason, decided to call out my buddy behind me, saying something like, "Oh, getting too late for ya." My buddy, who happens to be a fairly large fellow at about 315 pounds, 6 feet 3 inches, turned to him and slowly lifted a corner of his shirt to expose a big ol' nip. The band's frontman laughed and called him out again. "You won't do that on stage." Wrong thing to say. My buddy jumped up on stage and completely tore off his pearl snap shirt and danced to the entirety of Hank Williams Jr.'s "All My Rowdy Friends." For a big guy, my buddy has some moves. They finished up the song. He jumped off the stage, flipped off the lead singer, and we walked out the door to raucous applause and cheering. That's TN. Drinking whiskey and beer, and getting rowdy. About a year ago, I was outside this bar frequented by the pool students while I was getting food. This bar is known as a real crap show, college kids being just absolutely trashed as heck. But there was this one girl who really hit it out of the park. She staggers outside of the bar in your standard skank armor, miniskirt and low cut top. She sways for a few seconds, then grabs onto a small tree and unleashes a projectile spew at least 3 feet out into the street. As this is happening, I notice a puddle forming between her feet. Something is glistening on the side of her leg. The lady was firing from both ends. Now at this point, I imagine alcohol had shut down all but the most basic reptile parts of the limbic system, the deep evolutionarily ancient part of the brain that only computes danger. horniness, and rage. She looked at her work for a few seconds, slack-jawed with a pronounced forward lean, arms hanging at her sides like one of Romero's zombies. She then reached up, grabbed 2 handfuls of leaves and threw them on the puddle of urine. She did this for about 5 or 10 minutes, no doubt attempting to obscure her scent from saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths that her hindbrain told her must always be a threat. Upon finishing her task, she staggered back into the bar, and they let her in. Slow night at the pub and 3 of my friends and myself were watching a baseball game, hanging out with the bartender who we're friends with. Guy nobody knows walks in, looks completely hammered. He takes 2 steps, stops and leans onto the door with a weird look of extreme concentration on his face. After a few seconds of what looks to be an incredible amount of mental anguish, he quickly walks past us without a word and goes to the bathroom. Seconds after he passes us, my friend looks at me and goes, "Bro, that's nasty. You just fart?" "Nah man, I thought that was you." The 4 of us and the bartender all look at each other. Nobody farted. Dude, that guy may or may not have just crapped himself 20 feet from a bathroom. Bartender sends the kid who was training to check in the bathroom and we all follow. Kid walks in and the guy was standing in front of the sink, naked from the waist down, wiping his butt with his pants. "What the frick are you doing? UHH. I think I shitted myself." Bartender immediately goes to throw the guy out and he locks his crap-stained self in the stall. After 5 minutes of yelling at the guy, threatening to call the cops, he fills an ice bucket with water and dumps it on the guy, which finally gets him out of the stall. Unfortunately, it also floods the bathroom floor with crap. So now in addition to crap on the sink, crap on the toilet seat and crap on the walls of the stall, there's motherfucking crap soup covering the floor. Crappy McShitch himself flips out, starts hurling profanity and shaking his crap covered pants at the lot of us and we all run to the far side of the bar, lest he touch any of us. He stumbles out of the bar, still naked from the waist down, holding his crap stained pants and underwear and leaves. We watch him walk across the parking lot to Wendy's and a bank, both of which were closed, both of which he tries to ram the door open with his shoulder. At this point, we go back inside and the bartender presents us with a challenge. Anyone who can stand inside the bathroom for 30 seconds gets a shot of Jameson. You cannot imagine the horror that was the men's room. First time I ever turned down a free drink. TLDR. I think I shitted myself. TLDR. Guy shoots himself. Bartender makes entire situation worse. Someone decided to punch me on the head for no reason at all. He broke his hand doing so. Sweet justice. Mine was similar but I ended up with a broken nose. My crime was talking to the ex-girlfriend of the guy who hit me. Freaking W sucker punched me too. Bartending in 1999 downtown San Diego. There's a big convention center downtown and my bar was about a 15-minute walk from it. There was a Harley Davidson convention going on that night and it had been completely dead all night. I sent the cocktail waitress home about 20 minutes prior when 2 really burly bikers stumble in. I'm a pretty dang burly guy myself, but these guys had an edge to them that made my neck hair raise up. One guy walks straight to me at the bar. The other one heads to the back towards our bathrooms. The guy orders 2 beers and I crack them and set them down. He proceeds to chug one, then the other and orders 2 more. By now the other guy has come back from the bathrooms as I'm setting the next 2 beers down. He grabs one with one hand and the other. I notice he's clutching a $5 bill very tightly. There was something wrong about it, and I started to stare to figure out what it was. The bill was smeared with blood. Blood was also, I now noticed, dripping steadily from the bottom of his hand where he was clutching the money, apparently using it to try and soak up some of the blood. He sees me staring and with the creepiest voice says, "You should see the other guy," and smiles all weird. His friend slaps him on the arm and tells him to shut up. I quickly divert my attention elsewhere and start cleaning some bottles. About 5 minutes after this, I hear a lot of rumbling and about 20 freaking choppers come rolling up. I'm like, foo. I was seriously thinking how I was going to handle having 20 hardcore bikers in my bar with just me. Wasn't feeling so burly anymore. Thankfully, though, when the bikers pull up, the ones in my bar get up to leave. The non-wounded one comes over to pay the tab. Then his takes a $20 and pushed it over the bar. It goes without saying we weren't ever here. I nod mutely and take the money. When they leave I start closing. When I went to check the bathrooms before locking the doors, always did just to make sure no one is passed out in there. The crap was crazy. That biker who was hurt must have had it nasty. There was blood everywhere. The trash was full of blood-soaked paper towels and the sink was covered in bloody water. Made the gorge rise in my throat, there was so much of it. I always think that night could have ended much worse for me than getting a late night $20 tip. Lol. TL. DR. 2 bikers show up at my bar after fighting murdering someone and make my bathroom look like a slaughterhouse, but tipped me well. Gay Pride, Brooklyn. Dive bar with a stripper pole built into the bar. A 50-60-year-old woman climbs up on the pole and starts dancing. Cool, more power to her, until she takes off her top. Alright, then her pants, then her underwear, and she grinds on that pole like she has something against it. Like, straight up, slit on metal grinding. Then she gets in my and my roommate's faces with her butt in my face to get dollars while I surreptitiously try to puke into my beer. The bartender danced next. I made her wash her hands before pouring me another drink. I was drinking a whiskey and coke in a short glass with a tall straw. Someone made a joke. My hand jerked up and my head went down, thus shoving the straw up my nose. My nose started bleeding, and having been drinking it was quite the mess. Cue the following, all simultaneously. Friend 1 throws up at the sight of blood. Friends 2 and 3 assume I've been hit. Immediately go looking for whoever hit me. Friend 4 laughs maniacally at the scene. 2 more strangers throw up at the sight of blood. I somehow made it to the restroom and cleaned up the blood without the bouncer seeing any of what happened. How we didn't get kicked out that night is beyond me. I'm working as a bouncer. I walked into the men's bathroom. I noticed one guy with his pants off, sitting in the sink. I noticed the walls, typically white, were now brown, chunky and vomit streaked to boot. I walked out, told the manager I was sick and went home. I never mentioned it again. The best thing I have seen was actually the best thing I have done. I was at a sweet summer bar, 4 floors, the top being an amazing patio looking over the Otonabee River, Peterborough, Ontario. I had drank with my college friends there many a times. This time was particularly wild night, my 21st birthday. Some friends waitressed, overserved us there, and most of the staff knew us pretty well. I'm on the patio, having lost all of my friends and get the stumbles. I can't seem to keep my feet under me, but my brain and speech seems to be okay, knowing I'm without a doubt going to break my neck and die on the several flights of stairs down, or worse, live with the embarrassment. I wobbled over to a bouncer I was somewhat familiar with, and leveled with him. I swore I wouldn't make it. I gave him $10 and asked him to kick me out, by which I mean walk me down the stairs. On the 2nd or 3rd flight, I leaned back and told him to sell it, so he gently wobbled me back and forth and clenched the collar of my shirt, all the while painstakingly making sure I was not going to fall. I threw my arms up in the air and made party noises as the crowd cheered for me, for being the fun-wasted guy, not the obnoxious or violent kind. I got to the entrance at ground level and found all of my friends there trying to sort out where I was. The bouncer straightened my collar, brushed my shoulder off while I got raucous ovation from all my friends. On my next visit the bounce gave me $10 back. Don't really believe you. Heavy girl walks into bar drunk. Bartender says you are too drunk. Get out. Girl lifts up shirt to reveal sad little fried egg titties. Bartender points at door and says, listen, Janie, I have told you before, and I will tell you again, you are not welcome here. That is disgusting. Nobody wants to see your tea, but especially not your brother. Get out. I watched my friend pee into an empty beer pitcher under the counter of the bar. It was crowded enough that no one noticed him doing it. He then pulled up the beer pitcher, poured some into an empty glass and challenged a girl to a beer chugging competition. She accepted, chugged half of it, then declared, "This beer is warm and watered down." I was in utter shock and disbelief. He later took the girl home and rode backdoor in the shower with her. Double violation. High five. Lol. The vomit one is funny, sick, but funny. I think the most embarrassing one that I've seen was a toss-up between the guy who stumbled out of the bar one night and it was only like 10 PM too, to vomit his $30 worth of drinks onto a police car parked outside. Or, one time my girlfriends and I were at a club and some douche was hitting on us. He offered to get us some drinks but then asked me if I wanted to dance first. In the middle of dancing, he started to get hard, then whispers in my ear that his dong is hard and that he wanted to show it to me. I walked away, grossed out. My friend took the opportunity for some trolling and started dancing with him. He did the same thing to her, but she said come on then, let's see it. Douche whips it out on the dance floor. She responds with that, it starts laughing and walks away. All the while, the drunk douche is standing on the dance floor with his dong hanging out, fuming mad, calling my friend a fricking C and some other fierce words. The correct troll response to my dong is hard would have been so is mine. My worst one is to be cleaning out the girls' toilets in a club one night. I opened the stall to find the back wall and toilet pebble dashed at chest height in crap and a crappy thong lying on the floor. My guess as to what happened is that some unlucky girl was caught short, ran to the toilets and unloaded her guts full force before managing to remove the necessary clothing, resulting in a crap fountain covering everything possible behind her. A sight I will not soon forget. I work at a bar and few years ago a girl was dancing on the bar, like girls tend to do. Well, this time the bar was slippery. She slipped, falling towards us bartenders behind the bar, and hit her knees on the corner that separates the part of the bar reserved for rubber mats, 1/2 inch lower. That's not the worst part. First, those rubber mats were stolen just recently, so she nails her knees directly onto the corner and straight into the wood, continues to fall forward, then gets her eye impaled by a pourer from the house liquor located inconveniently below her. She is so drunk she doesn't even realize fully what happened. She then tries to pull it out as we all stand there mortified. Needless to say, you can't dance on the bar anymore. TLDR. Girl falls off bar, impales her eye. Might be quite tame, but I saw the guy throw up liquid all over the floor of a bar. Somehow none of the bouncers or bar staff notice and the pukey liquid ice just left there. A few seconds later some girl comes back from the loos and slips up in the liquid. She is drunk and her mate struggles to pull her up, but she slips over as well. Hilarious and disgusting at the same time. American college kid got kicked out of the Oktoberfest tent in Munich at 9:15 am. The tent opens at 9 am, so he managed 15 minutes flat before being banned. This one kid in particular must have been roughly 19 or 20 years old and bought a Mass or Stein, whatever you want to call it. It's a liter of beer in a big butt mug. Anyhow, he jumps up on the table and announces to his 12 or so buddies that he's going to skull the lot. It's obvious to all that this kid has absolutely no chance, but A+ for effort. So he's on the table and trying to down this enormous beer, all the while his table is yelling skull, skull at him. He gets about 20% of the way through and bugs out. All his buddies start booing him. He's pissed, so he kind of flings his beer, not letting go of the mug, but kind of flinging the beer in annoyance of his poor effort. Unfortunately, the contents of the mug land on one of those nutcase German security guards, who promptly frog marches him out the door. Hope the trip was worth it, mate. I was a barmaid at a neighborhood dive bar in Cleveland. There were rarely more than 10 people in the place at any one time. The jukebox was loaded with terrible classic rock. The bar didn't serve food apart from bags of chips and the occasional beef jerky, and the clientele were mostly old reprobates who lived within walking distance. One of the female regulars, a woman in her late 30s, was frequently the drunkest person in the bar. On one very special evening, she stumbled toward the back area where the ladies' room and the kitchen were located. Shortly thereafter, I needed something from the kitchen and went in. The woman apparently mistook the kitchen for the ladies' loo, as she'd opened the oven door and was defecating onto it. A few weeks later, two of the old drunks got into an argument over who was president before Calvin Coolidge. This was in 1988, before the internet, so the question wasn't as easy to resolve as it would be today. One guy got so frustrated that he went into the parking lot and returned with a cinder block, which he used to bash in the other guy's skull. The amount of blood that poured and squirted from that guy's head was unbelievable. Paramedics said that his blood was ultra thin due to long-term alcoholism. The dude bled out before EMS could save him. Funniest thing I've seen in a bar is the girl drunk enough to leave with me. It was funny because all her friends were laughing. I once stayed at a hostel in London on the way to Morocco. After meeting a friend for drinks, I went back to the hostel. The pub bit was shut, but all the Aussie staff were having a mental time in there, so I knocked on the door and asked if I could join them. So we had a mad evening with drinks and people snorting stuff. The end of the night comes and I head off to bed. Bear in mind it's a hostel and there were about 10 bunks in the room, most of them full of weary travelers. 10 minutes after going to bed, 2 of the staff roll and jump on one of the bunks and start faux frick, about 3 feet away from me. After about 2 or 3 minutes the guy jumps up shouting and turns the light on. Crikey Sheila, that's disgusting. I can't carry on with that smell. Turns out she'd just taken her shoes off and had the worst smelling feet in the world. He then gets her shoes in a plastic bag and hangs them outside the window. The next bit is priceless. He sits down on the bed, grabs his phone and phones his mate who's downstairs just to tell him he had to stop shagging a bird because her feet were so bad. To which he facepalmed and moaned, "I knew we should have gone to mine." Turns out she had a flat just down the road. I love that the Aussie staff literally said Crikey and Sheila in the same sentence. Achievement unlocked. Stereotypes. Doubt anyone will believe this, and I can't still believe I seen it myself. Went to a club in Manchester, UK called Factory, and on the middle floor there is a dance floor. Me and friends were all dancing. Next thing we know there is a guy and some smashed girl in the corner fricking whilst stood up about 3 meters from where we were on a packed out dance floor. We just looked, laughed and carried on. After a minute or so, he came to his senses and she just looked a state, really drunk, and her hair was everywhere and she just stumbled off. Was by a long shot the weirdest thing I've seen. Not as bad as most, but here it goes. I was at this bar with a patio in the back, raised 1 flight off the ground with an alleyway next to it. A girl I knew had to pee real bad, and the bar was jammed, so she lifts herself up on the patio railing, leans her butt over the railing and shoots out a golden stream. She was wearing a skirt. As for underwear, I don't know. What she didn't see was the dude who passed out in the alleyway that she pee all over. I work at a notorious late night dive in New Orleans, home of the $1.50 Schlitz, and we get crap on the time. All the time. People come here drunk at 3 AM and proceed to get even drunker until the sun comes up. Most of it is random fights between hormone-enraged college guys that always end up bloody, or people on the couch nearly fricking. People fricking outside is always one of my favorites, since it's kinda a dumpy neighborhood and the neighbors do tend to stay out late. Also is the vast number of people who seem to be talented enough to miss the curb and sprain their ankles. There is a legend that if you get naked at a bar, you will get free drinks. So more often than I care to recount, drunk men will strip in an attempt to get their female companions to strip. Rarely do they succeed, but it's always fun to have to tell a bunch of grown men to put their clothes back on. We instituted a casual rule, based on bartenders' taste, that if it's on Jersey Shore, it ain't coming through the door. That has led to many fights for whoever is working the door, but there are always those fun fights that you just love to have and win. What else? We have our random sea kids. We had to 86 one guy permanently because he was giving massages. Weird creepy massages. He lives across the street from me, which makes sitting out on my porch near impossible sometimes, as he'll come over and ask for beers. Since I'm a bartender, I must always have beers on hand. Right. And the vomit. Oh, the vomit. I was behind the bar once and some dude opened his mouth to seemingly make a drink order, when lo and behold, a stream of hot liquid vomit shot out of his mouth onto me. That was the night I closed the bar earlier than anyone else ever had. We store our beer in sink-like tubs filled with ice behind the bar, so our stash of the cheap beers was contaminated by his vomit. I opened the door once while coming onto my midnight shift, only to be greeted by vomit. Some guy was in the process of running outside to vomit, and I just happened to be in the line of fire. The worst is when you see someone you've been serving all night get out to their car, vomit pure liquid for 2 minutes, then turn on the car and drive away. This is after them telling you they won't drive. I'm sure there are liability issues for me as a bartender, but some people are just self-destructive and will do it no matter what you tell them. Despite all of this, I love my job more than anything. TLDR. I work at an all-night bar and crap happens constantly, but I'm usually too drunk myself to recall all the details. I was working as a bar back in a classy cocktail bar on London Bridge when, one quiet night, the manager comes in pleased as punch saying that he'd booked out the bar for an after hours party and that he wanted us to stay and provide drinks until it finished. We pressed him when he started getting cagey about the details of the party, how many people, what it was for, etc. And, eventually, he admitted that he'd rented out the bar to a group of middle-aged swingers. 2 of the staff walked out straight away while the rest of us demanded time and a half and that we could leave if it got too weird. He accepted and we carried on with the night. I gave up after I saw a naked 50+ woman being double teamed by a 350-pound guy and one of our bouncers grabbed my money, a bottle of scotch and tried to forget everything I'd seen on the 4 AM bus ride home. Never sat on any of the couches in that place ever again. I was a bartender in my early 20s and I have seen some interesting things, but my absolute favorite was this one. One night a fight broke out between 2 guys. Sadly, fighting was quite common at this place. I sighed and picked up the phone to call the cops while the other bartender went to go break it up. As I'm on the phone, I'm watching the fight and one guy's pants fall below his butt in the scuffle to reveal fishnet stockings instead of underwear. I swear it was as if time stood still. The silence was broken by one of his friends asking, "Dude, are you wearing pantyhose?" What happened next blew my mind. Fishnet guy pulled up his pants and charges his own friend, the one who asked if he was wearing pantyhose, hitting and screaming the word F. His friend knocked him out in one punch, then sat down and finished his beer. I was at a party once where this very attractive girl puked all over a lounge chair and then stumbled away. 2 minutes later this drunk guy comes stumbling over and before anyone can stop him, he lies down in the lounge chair. I was once at a bouncer at a bar in Philadelphia called The Plough and the Stars, named after an Irish play. One night, a man in his 30s came in with 2 women of about the same age. They were both blonde and very attractive. One was his girlfriend and the other one was her friend. For the purposes of this story, we'll call them Paul, Irene, and Anne. Irene, Paul's GF, was what people in the hospitality industry refer to as an inconsolable bee. From the first moment she walked in, all anyone on the staff wanted to do was punch her in her stupid fricking face. The night continues and Anne is really putting back the drinks. By midnight she is blackout drunk and Paul and I carry her outside while Irene is endlessly bitching for no reason. Paul is actually a really nice guy, and you can tell he is embarrassed by the behavior of his companions. Anne lets out a moan, tilts her head forward and vomits the liquid equivalent of the Camden Aquarium all over the sidewalk near the door. Paul is very upset, but I tell him to relax and I go inside to get some hot water to wash it off into the street. While I'm inside, a fight breaks out in front of a club called Mint directly across the street. What starts as a scuffle turns into a brawl and by the time I go outside there are about 30 cops, indiscriminately hitting everyone with billy clubs. Philadelphia PD has it rough. This is not meant to insult them. Irene actually has the gall to direct her bee stream at a cop. While Paul is trying to carry Anne away from this scene, she is complete dead weight and stretched across his shoulders. Irene starts to get in the cop's face and goes as far as to physically push him. In one of the most righteous moments of my life, the cop takes the billy club, hold it like a hockey stick, and cross-checks her a good 10 feet into a row of tables and chairs. She is pretty much down for the count. Then I hear Paul yell "what the frick" and he starts to rush the police officer while still holding Anne on his back. I see the cop winding up to crack Paul in the head, and I can't let him go out like that. I step in between and get a billy club right across my clavicle. I spent the next 30 minutes trying not to cry. While I was being yelled at, Paul slipped away with Anne and Irene. Here's to you, Paul. I hoped you dropped both those dumb smuts in the river. TLDR. I worked at a bar. Guy came with friend and girlfriend. Girlfriend got into altercation with police. Guy was about to get destroyed by cop. I intervened to try and save him. I used to work in a pub in Bristol, UK. One night a bunch of tinkers come in. Think of Brad Pitt's clan in Snatch. We kick them out at the end of the night but watch them from the window as they were arguing loudly amongst each other. Suddenly 2 of the huge women start punching the crap out of each other. The men try to break it up but eventually join in and there are now 7 or 8 massively drunk tinkers brawling on the street. At some point one of the men picks up a huge breeze block and just launches it into the window of a nice car that's parked next to them. They all turned their rage on the car and just destroy it. They were back in the morning. It was their own car. As a bartender and heavy drinker, this is the funniest story I have read here so far. Everything else is pretty standard bar nonsense, but I find this quite humorous. After a bar fight, saw an EMT cut a man's pants off. In addition to him not wearing any underwear, he had a cucumber taped to his inner thigh. I was with an acquaintance at a bar that was going out of business the following day, so the owner was giving away as much liquor beer as he could. People were really taking advantage of this and getting plastered. My friend ended up getting really drunk and started hassling the owner of the bar about buying a bottle of high-end tequila for $3. The bar owner refused my friend's increasingly aggressive and somewhat insulting bids for said bottle and offers him a shot for the road if he'd just get out. Friend agrees and is presented with a flaming shot of something in a disposable plastic shot glass. It quickly becomes apparent that my friend has never had a flaming shot as he stares at the cup as if he were mesmerized. Meanwhile, the plastic begins to melt and threatens to spill the contents onto the bar. Others see this and begin chanting, "Drink, drink, drink." So my friend picks up the cup, puts it to his lips, and, surprisingly, doesn't like the feeling of the flames on his lips. Just as I'm getting the words "blow it out" out of my mouth, he tips his head back and attempts to pour the still flaming alcohol directly into his mouth. He misses and pours the flaming liquid all over his face, which then causes his head and face to catch on fire. This wouldn't have been too difficult to handle if a self-proclaimed EMT, who happened to be holding a large cup filled with vodka, tripped over my friend's body as he fell to the floor in an attempt to put out his flaming hair and face. The vodka spilled out of the cup and onto my friend's flames. I ended up covering his head with my jacket to put the flames out. He runs out of the bar to my car. I apologize to the bar owner, pay a few bucks for the beer I had, and drive my friend to the hospital. While there, his nose skin begins dripping off of his nose and some juggalos and their girlfriends start laughing at him. I join in the laughter. My friend is now called Ghost Rider. TL. DR. See guy light head on fire. Fire fueled by more alcohol. Hospital hilarity ensues. Seen my buddy singing karaoke too drunk to notice that his dong was hanging out of his pants in front of the whole bar. Nobody corrected him. He finished the song and sat down. I didn't tell him until the next day. Good times. Once when I was living in the French Quarter in New Orleans, it was Mardi Gras and I was hanging out in a bar a few blocks off of Bourbon with a friend and his buddies from out of town. I notice this guy stumble into the bar with two women that look like H. They're all over him and they push him towards the ATM. A common scam is that H will find a drunk guy and make some excuse to get them to go to an ATM to watch them put in their PIN. They take that guy somewhere. He passes out. Then they empty his account as much as they can. He steps up to the ATM in the bar and I pretend I'm his best friend. "Hey, where did you come from? How's it going?" And I tell the ladies I have to borrow him for a minute. Once I grab him away, I ask him if he knows what's going on and if he wants to be here. He tell me he doesn't know how he ended up with these girls. He was pretty blitzed but coherent. So I ask him where his hotel is. Tell him it's out the door. So many blocks over and up. And to run out the door when I tell him to. So many minutes later when the H realize he's not with me anymore, they're like, "Where did your friend go?" And I tell them I don't know. He probably left. Then they start threatening me, "I'm gonna go get my pimp and you're gonna get fricked up. Blah blah blah." And I go, please. This is my neighborhood. I know half the people in this bar who are watching you threaten me right now. It's Mardi Gras. There are cops on every corner. GTFO. Needless to say, they left pretty quick. TL. DR. Earned some viral karma by saving a guy during Mardi Gras from getting scammed by 2H. Got threatened by those H. Then laughed in their face like a boss. Good on ya for being decent to a stranger. I once was waiting outside of a bar with two friends and we were all pretty wasted. We then saw a girl who had definitely surpassed us in alcohol consumption. Or she just has an extremely low tolerance. She was all over the place and she couldn't even form comprehensible sentences words. We couldn't help but lol as she tried to break up a fight between two equally dumb guys. It was like a mime trying to break up two drunken children. Her friend was mad and tried to sympathize with us to no avail. She then spotted a cab on the road and walked towards it, tripping on the curb, falling face first into a moat of half ice half freezing water on the side of the road. This is at 2 AM in -25°C northern Canadian weather. She then painstakingly crawled through this 2-inch deep freezing liquid to the cab, and as she finally got to it, she reached helplessly for the door handle just as the cab pulled away. In hindsight, I feel kind of like a dong, but it has to be one of the funniest things I've witnessed. Guy sitting at the bar a couple of stools down from me, drinks the last of his pint, burps into his hand, then tilts his bar stool onto its back legs. He barfs between his legs, onto the floor, tilts back into his regular upright position and carries on. Best part? Bartender watches this, no reaction, then comes over and hands him another pint. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.